Hi, welcome back to the Mike Gormley Show. We were just listening to a song called An Act of Love by the band Bearing All, which is made up of uh, basically two guys from Oingo Boingo and from Ira. Your list is so long, I guess maybe I could say Bob Dylan as the most
Most recent.
recognizable.
Most recent.
Yeah, most recent. Well, it was a couple of decades ago and it's recent.
Yeah. Yeah.
When he just called you out of the blue one day and said, after not talking to him in years, and he said, "How you doing?"
It was about 33 years, I think it was, and it was about something sort of unrelated. And he started the conversation as if we had spoken the day before, continuing the conversation from the day before, and it had been all those years. And when we finally got back together, I hadn't seen him. We were talking on the phone several times, more than several. And then I finally went into the what became the first of the sessions for Shadow Kingdom. And at the end of the session, I said, Bob, we got to let's not wait 35 more years to see each other. And he said, why not? He's got a great sense of humor. So yeah, that was the most recent.
And he meant it.
Or he really meant it. Yeah.
Maybe, well, he probably will live to 150. I don't know. He's kind of working towards it.
He keeps on going, boy.
Yeah. Energizer bunny.
Well, um, where does I'm looking at questions here because it's dark in my room here. Um, dum, dum, dum,
Where
dee.
did our name come from?
Just gotta wait. Just wait. Oh,
Don't
let's
push
find
me.
out.
Don't
Let's
push
find
me.
out. Let's find out where Bearing All came from. And I hope there's a provocative story behind this name and not, it's not really called Boring All.
No.
No, it wouldn't be that. Steve?
Well,
Since you let it off, you lead it
yeah,
off.
it's from our last names. BAR
Oh, really? I
ING.
didn't even catch that.
Yeah, so it's bearing all, and all was just a play on words. I thought of, well, we're kind of bearing ourselves to the world creatively, certainly.
But we did, after we decided on that, we did get in trouble because if you Google bearing all, you get all kinds of stuff you don't want to see.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
get nudist hiking camp.
News
Uh,
hiking.
the person Gabby Chenet, who did our web business, we want to put a plug in for Gabby because she did such great work, and she's doing the social media stuff along with you, Mike, helpfully. The search for the domain name was very difficult because it was all about nudism. So we
What's
successfully
difficult about that?
no, well, it wouldn't get it to us. So we are actually, the website is bearing-all.com for
Ah,
everybody who wants to find out all the latest doings of us. It's bearing-all.com.
so you sort of analyzed the music behind Bearing All and individual songs and so on, but what are your expectations for this album and this band? You're not going to tour. You said you're not going to tour. What are the expectations of the music that you've made and hopefully what people hear? Steve.
Steve,
I,
good.
well, the whole idea is that we worked on this for 8 years and nobody was hearing it. It's like, well, let's get it out so someone can hear it. That's the first reward is that other people can hear it. The
Uh-huh.
second the second big reward is we can move on. We did this. Now we can start doing new stuff. But we much like this interview today, over the last couple of years, we'd spent lots of time trying to figure out how to get it out. And nobody, people were interested and not interested, and it's so another part of it was we wanted to move on and keep doing this. And
You're trying to bring something new out at a time where it's really get difficult to get people to listen just because there's so many new things out there.
right, right.
So social media, I guess, is the answer to that.
Well, I think yeah, of course. That's our only megaphone, really. Terrestrial radio doesn't exist. Newspapers don't exist. Television doesn't really exist. Um, we're flying in the face of all the realities. We're not deluding ourselves into thinking that this is an easy thing to pull off. The reward, again, with at the risk of throwing a cliche, it's the doing of it. It's the creation of the stuff, because it does feed both of us. The What happens to it, of course, is important. But while you're making it, it's not even on my radar. Well, maybe you too, Steve. What's going to happen, as we're making a song? What's going to happen to the song? Um, Rick Rubin's book, which I think, what's the title of it? Creative Act, or what, the famous
Yeah.
book put out. It's a good book. I'm not a huge fan of the guy because I don't quite understand all of what he does, but I really liked a lot of the book, in that he was really wanting the person creating to get away from the expectation of what happens to your creation at the time of doing it. You don't want to self-sabotage by, you know, making stuff that's impossible for people to decipher. But I think now that the album is done, yeah, the hard work comes, which is non-musical, which is getting the word out. We'd like to think that what we're presenting is compelling enough to merit some attention, because there's a lot, as you just said, Mike. There's a lot of stuff. There's too much stuff. What is it? It's one song every second being uploaded today. Some ridiculous.
Oh, it's something like, I don't know the figures. It's like 80,000 is what I've been told, and I don't know if that's per day or per week.
I think it's per day. I think it's 80 to
Yeah.
100,000 songs a day. Now, without being a very snotty person, I would say a lot of it's not very good. But then there's the stuff that really is. And I listen as much as I can. I'm mostly interested in what we're doing rather than listening to other people, but I've heard some great stuff. And yes, the key is how do we bang the drum loudly enough for people to hear? Well, we're doing it right now. Um, one Just to go back a little bit about how we approach any of this stuff, is the concept of limitation, setting up restriction, setting up an intention of, um, keeping our sandbox very small, or
Hmm.
keeping it contained, not necessarily small, because the digital world that we live in as far as audio, is limitless. And it especially for younger people who didn't ever live in the analog world, as Steve and I both did, which was all about limitation and restriction. And so you had to plan, for example, no, you can't have another background vocal track because we're out of tracks. So you got to work with what you have. All that stuff's broken through. And we noticed with a lot of younger people didn't have to make the transition from analog restriction to digital unrestriction, they record 5,000 tracks. They record a guitar solo 200 times. Well, we'll sort it out later. That's absolutely not what we do. You know, I I'm more guilty than Steve, as I erase stuff more than Steve does. He keeps everything. I just get rid of it. No, we might need it, and he's usually right, unfortunately. But the idea of setting up restrictions is critical to how we work. So, for example, Steve, the pianos was a good
Yeah,
example.
the idea was white keys and black keys. We went in, the two of us had, I have like 5 or 6 toy pianos and a celeste. The two of us in the room together, recorded together, um, played. We played phrases. I think we picked numbers of how many notes to play and how not to play, and then
Eighth notes for one, and
yeah,
and also that it was mono. It was one mic,
it's
so
one mic.
leakage. We couldn't separate any of them.
So it was a performance of he and I navigating this, and that was kind of the basis of where we built the tune from.
That's but that's the way recording was, right? I mean, you were talking about all what can be done now, but in fact, you guys were restricted to
Well,
so many tracks.
we tried to restrict it. in the smallest compartments, it was just the two of us doing something together. We either played guitar parts together or we played these piano parts together, and that became the basis of our experiment.
Okay.
Well, one of the tunes we each chose the hardest guitar to play. He had like a 12 string. What?
That we both own.
Yeah, that we both own. And so we were both fighting our instruments at the same time. We're trying to express ourselves to each other.
So result is an explosion. Kind of like both would have run into each other, but orderly explosion.
I mean, one of the early ones that I it was side effects where he picked two notes, I picked two notes, he picked three notes, I picked three notes, we picked a rhythm, and we made a line, we made a little melody and took it from there. And we again we recorded the two of us playing it at the same time, as opposed to overdubbing it and getting it right.
Right. So the idea was that there are I mean, if anybody was bothering to look at our multi-track sessions, there's all kinds of noise and chaos that you have to sort through to figure out where the essence of the songs are. You have to discover them.
Yeah.
I'll go back to that again.
So we're going to go into a commercial, another one, and we're going to go in with a song called "No One Walks on Water Anymore," and I think we need to talk about that after the commercial. It's an inviting name of a song. So we'll be listening to Bearing All doing "No One Walks on Water Anymore," in brackets, anymore. And this is the Mike Gormley Show, and thanks again for being here. Oh, Jeremiah.
Recording stopped.
I don't think I can do anything about that. Hey everyone, this is Mike Gormley. It's a Mike Gormley Show with Steve Bartek and Ira Ingber from from a whole bunch of bands, but from lately Bearing All. When we out to commercial, we went out with a song called "No One Walks on Water Anymore." Is there some deep-seated meaning behind that title, or the song in general, or was it just thought it was kind of a fun title?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, what?
There's a line in there that repeats itself a few times. There's two lines that repeat. One is what we need is a miracle. And I guess I was feeling something about the urgency of whatever my perception of the current state of affairs as I saw it. Well, nothing short of a miracle is going to get us out of this one, was kind of what I was thinking. And that even though I don't make a habit of reading the Bible, it seemed like it was more routine in Bible days where these miracles would just happen, and then suddenly people stopped walking on water. What happened? I mean, where'd the magic go? Wasn't that just
it just wasn't the thing anymore?
Yeah, it ran out of fashion. I mean, how did that happen? That seemed like it was going pretty well. And then the other line that repeats is every now and then, which kind of was a door open, like, well, maybe it can still happen. So it's not a dark song in terms of that. It's some sense that we can pull out of this thing, I think, is where I was going with it. Much to my embarrassment, to a degree, when that Beatle record came out, the resurrected
Then and Now.
No, it's Now and Then. It's called Now and Then.
Now and Then. No, is it? Okay.
And I thought, oh shit, they did it again to me. They took us, but fortunately, the Beatle record didn't really last long, and we hope ours lasts longer. But I thought, if John Lennon can do it, well, I'll do it too. That he made.
Yeah, yeah. What about you guys you're very educated musicians. I know, Steve, you went to UCLA and other places, and Ira, you studied at university and you had private lessons and so on and so forth. With music that you're doing, and you could answer this by saying, well, just listen to it and you'll find out. But I'm going to ask Steve what you think. Does jazz and or classical music enter into the music of Barry All or the music that you like to do in general? Steve?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Steve.
Many years
What?
ago. Go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
Well, one jazz. I mean, it depends on what you consider jazz. I
Yeah.
mean, I spent time playing in fusion big bands, but I I'm not a jazz player. I spent time learning Django Reinhardt style, but I'm not a Django. I can't do a Django imitation. That's not, I spent time, you're right. I spent time learning some of these things so that they're in the back of my mind. And that as we write or perform, you draw on those all the time.
Yeah.
Same with the classical. I mean, I have, the minimal bachelor's degree in music composition from UCLA. So what do you do when you graduate from college with a degree like that? You end up playing at a Holiday Inn. That's what I did, and then joining a rock band. Um, and but having had that training allowed me to look at music in a slightly different way than someone who just picked up the guitar and started playing.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's better or worse. It's just different. I was always told that my first instrument was the flute. And so I was always told that the way I played lines on the guitar was much more flute-like than guitar-like.
Hmm.
And I kind of agree. I mean, because that's where I came from. So all of these things that we studied, anybody studies, becomes part of your DNA.
And even if you don't study per se, but you're just in the
Listening.
world, in Los Angeles, whether these will affect you, whatever's going on around you.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
a lot of people don't need to study because they listen and they take it in. I'm
Yeah.
not one of those. I needed to study.
Mhm. Well, good job. Ira, what about an educational background for a musician? I mean, there are some great musicians who don't know how to don't know how to read music and so on and so forth.
They're the outliers.
Well, I work with a musician like that who is just amazing, John Bryan,
Sure.
who he understands when we go over scores and stuff. He understands what's going on, but he doesn't really read music. But if you go watch his show, he has an encyclopedic knowledge of all kinds of music because he can tap into any kind of song at any moment on stage when he's playing. Um, but he's not college educated with a degree in composition like me.
Right. Nor were the Beatles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the necessary stepping stone for the kind of music that they play.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, just so we can get to other stuff, I know we're a little bit pressed for time, but the people you're talking about, Mike, who've done these things, McCartney's a good example. They're the freaks of nature, you know. They can do this stuff without the some of the training that Steve had, that I had. Mine was different than Steve's, but I studied with people,
Mm.
and but also for me and for Steve, we grew up in LA, and my older brother is a guitar player, and I was around before I was playing music. I was around musicians who were really, really good.
Your brother was an accomplished musician and in some very interesting bands.
My brother was in the first Mothers of Invention band, and then he was with Captain Beefheart, and he wrote "Don't Bogart That Joint" with Fraternity of Man, his own band. But at my house, my parents' house, with my brother and myself living in it at the time, um, future Wrecking Crew people were in my house, as just coming by to hang out and play. So that was a lot of my education, was just seeing these guys play. And, the times in which we grew up was a time of really absorbing um, this explosion that just coincidentally happened as we were growing up. The pop music explosion, the pop cultural explosion, and we were in the eye of the hurricane in LA. I was in the eye of the hurricane. I was in Hollywood. I went to Fairfax High School. You know, it was like dead center in the middle of this thing. And but I think to answer your question even more detailed, Mike, these days, because there's so much access to information online, you know, if you're inquisitive, certainly driven, a young musician, you can learn it all easily. It's all waiting for you. It's all the instruction is just waiting for you to be to do a couple clicks.
Uh, we're getting near the end of our time here, and I want to go into your backgrounds a little more. Steve, did you think Oingo Boingo was going to become as successful as it did, as it is?
Well, as it is now, yeah. At the time, even up to the point we broke up, I didn't feel that we were all that successful. Every year, at one point, I finally had a wife and a child, and I was going, okay, well, I'll last one more year, but if we don't, you know, but in every year we made just a little bit more money, or the record sounded just a little bit better, you know. So I stuck it out, and Danny relying on me to be a co-producer and, you know, horn arranger and stuff, it kept me solid in there, even though the band wasn't getting ready to play anywhere but LA. The band, we'd go on tour and there'd be interviews to do an interview on a radio station, and they couldn't play the record. So there was all kinds of barriers to thinking that the band was going to break through and be a real band. I mean, a big band. So
you're still working with Danny Elfman. I mean, they have been all these years.
I still do. He still trusts me, which is nice. Um, we both took a leap with Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and learned a whole lot from Bob Batamy, the music editor, who walked me through how to do timings and click tracks, and got Danny from the beginning of Pee-wee. Danny was just writing and giving me a tape, and by the end he had a SMPTE box and was writing his stuff to click. So Pee-wee's Big Adventure was a masterclass in us learning what the basics are for doing that. And then the first, you know, the first recording session is like, okay, here's stuff. We had Lenny Niehaus as the official orchestrator, but he didn't want credit. And what I did, I worked with Danny and got sketches and wrote out what I thought it should be. And he took my sketches and officially orchestrated. And so during Pee-wee's, I learned how to handle Danny's and how to make it work to the picture. And through Lenny Niehaus, I saw what can be done with what I put on the page, and how to lay out a page so that it's clear to the orchestra what the intent was. So the whole thing was huge. The first time we heard the orchestra play the opening to Pee-wee, is like Danny and I were just, we want to do this. We want to keep doing it.
And you did. How many movies now?
It's over 100. It's probably 120, 130. We just finished Beetlejuice 2 a few months ago, which should be out, I think, in October.
I've seen stuff about it, so it must be coming out pretty soon.
Yeah, coming out soon.
Ira, you've worked on a lot of films and TV shows as a composer, as a musician.
Some composing, more as a musician. I've scored my own scored movies for other people. And I learned pretty early on that wasn't a job I wanted, because it was, as the composer, Steve knows this with Danny, you need to have a passion for film music, which I don't have. I like music. I like when music serves itself, not another master. And the amount of hoops that you have to jump through in order to be a full-time composer. Songwriting differently. Songs interest me more than score. But as a studio musician, a number of movies, including the one that Steve and I really got so acquainted with each other on, which was Midnight Run. with Danny way back in the late 80s. It was the beginnings of our really working together. And I think also not just recording TV and film, but just working with other people in band situations or as a case, as a studio case, you learn so much from the interaction with other musicians, how where my strengths are, where my weaknesses are, where certainly what my interests are. And that brings us back to bearing all, and that is the interest, just to kind of bookend what we started with, was to create things that first and foremost satisfy us, but also that allow us this at this stage of our lives, which is, you know, a little bit more advanced than it was 20 minutes ago, that we have the you know, we have the means to make what I like to call unapologetic music. We have all the equipment we would ever need. We have a modicum of talent. We have all the time. And, you know, when it's finally done, if we didn't succeed in communicating our intention to the listener, it wasn't because we can blame, well, that singer was no good, or I wish the studio was better. No, this is the optimized everything that Steve and I have. Everything is as good as it can be, and we sweat every little detail of it. And so very few opportunities have come to me in my career where everything has been optimized, except for the things that I did on my own. If I'm working for somebody else, well, yeah, everything was great, but the songs were terrible, you know, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Bearing all allows everything to be ultimately what I like to term unapologetic.
Okay, well, we're going to go to a commercial, and we're going to listen to a song called Just One Kiss that has a relatively normal title in this album. We'll listen to Just One Kiss. We'll be back to the Mike Gormley Show after the commercial happens.